Conservation Commission. I would like to open the hearing.
This conference will now be recorded.
April 15th, 2020. First of all, I want to thank everybody for participating and hope that everybody is safe and healthy. So first I have to read a declaration from Governor Baker, and that is the following. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitation on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the Town of Harwich Conservation Commission on April 15, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. will be conducted via remote participation. Specific information and the general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the Town of Harwich website at www.harwich-ma.gov. For this meeting, members of the public who wish to watch the meeting may do so via recording on demand on the Harwich Channel 18 website or on our Town of Harwich YouTube page, which is https://www.youtube.com/user/Harwich Channel 18/videos !disable _polymer =1. And I apologize if anybody, I guess we can repeat that if need be, Amy.
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. If there are no questions at this point, I think what I'd like to do is start the agenda. And first we have a notice of intent for 0 Old Campground Road, the proposal to construct a duplex. Is there an applicant present to speak to this proposal?
Good evening, John O'Reilly representing the Davenport companies. I don't know if Christian Davenport is on the line, but he was going to try to call in.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to give us a summary, please?
Sure, thank you very much. We were in front of you folks probably 4 or 5 weeks ago, where we had proposed a duplex building on the parcel. It is house number 2 Old Campground. We were showing a significant amount of disturbance within the buffer zone, 50 to 100, almost or a little over 9,000 square feet of disturbance within the buffer. The Davenport team went back to the drawing board, heard the commission pretty clearly, and came up with a completely new footprint. It is still a duplex, but instead of a longer ranch style duplex, this is a more conventional duplex where living spaces both on the first and second floor. And the total number of bedrooms have been reduced given the design of the house from 8 originally proposed to 4 that's currently proposed. So what we've done is we've relocated the limit of work line to show a total disturbance within the buffer zone of just over 1,200 square feet. So a dramatic reduction. Driveways are basically driveways and the house itself are completely outside the 100-foot buffer, and we're looking to disturb a very small portion about 90 feet away from the BVW at the closest point for grading. And we actually have shown the same type of shrubbery and grading and planting that were shown on the lot to the north that the commission reviewed last week, 2 weeks ago. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions the commission has.
Thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us?
Yes, a very brief one. This has changed drastically, as Mr. O'Reilly said. This last plan shows a different house design with a total of 4 bedrooms. All structure is outside the 100-foot buffer. The only activity on the 100-foot buffer is some disturbance due to grading, and then replanting with natives, mostly along the driveway. And I'll keep it short, and I would recommend approval of this project with the current changes.
Thank you, Amy. And yeah, thank you for working with the proponent to shape the project in the right direction for us. So what I'll do is I'll ask for comments from the commissioners, and I'm going to call you out by first name. If you could please, the first time I call you out, give you a full name, and I'll start with you, Stan.
I have no comments here, Brad. It looks good to me.
Thanks, Stan. Mark?
I have no comments at all. I'm very pleased with the changes. I think they did a commendable job.
I agree. Thanks. Ernie?
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable with the changes that have been made, and it's I appreciate their working with us on this one. Thank you.
Yep. Carolyn?
I have no comments. I just want to say thank you.
Mm-hmm. John?
Yes, John Ketchum here. I agree with the previous comments. I guess they've made big changes, and it looks like great changes. I have no problems with this.
Okay, thanks. And finally, Jim?
Yes, Jim Donovan here. Yeah, I appreciate the changes. It's a good outcome for the site. The only comment I would have is similar to the other property, if could have 3 years before issuing a certificate of compliance to make sure the plantings become an effective living fence.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Okay, is that acceptable?
Yes, Chairman. Similar to the 12-hole campground, the 3-year provision is fine.
Okay, good. Okay, with that, I'd like to ask one of the commissioners for a motion on this NOI.
Mr. Chairman, real quick, do you want to see if there's anybody else in the audience?
Yes, thanks for that reminder. Are there any comments from the audience?
And again, if you're on the phone, it's *6.
Okay, hearing none, then I'll call for a motion for one of the commissioners.
I'll make a motion to approve the notice of intent for 0 Old Campground Road, map 30, parcel 12, construction of a duplex.
I second
Second, please.
I second it.
Second.
Stan.
Okay, seconded by Stan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
You know what? Amy, do you think we need a roll call, or can we?
Aye.
Yes, please.
Okay, so we'll do a roll call, the same order as for comments. So all those in favor say aye, starting with Stan.
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
John?
John Ketchum is aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Okay, and myself, Brad Chase, I vote aye as well, so it's unanimous. The motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You folks remain safe.
Okay, you too. Thank you. Okay, next on the agenda, Amy, we have a request to continue, I believe, until what date? For 220 Long Pond
May
Drive?
6, 2020.
Okay.
Correct. Yeah, you got it. Just announce it, and then we'll continue.
All right, so the next notice of intent on the agenda is for 220 Long Pond Drive, map 102, parcel K2. It's a proposal to remove a walkway, steps, retaining wall, and construct new walkway, landing, stairs, stone wall, and plant area of erosion. They've asked for a continuance until May 9th, 2020, and I move that we grant the continuance.
Second that, Brad.
Okay, it is, sorry, May 6th. All right, seconded by Ernie. All those in favor, I'll start with you, Stan.
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
John?
John Ketchum is aye.
Jim?
Aye.
Okay, myself, Brad, aye. So it's unanimous. The motion carries to continue to May 6th. Okay, next on the agenda is 46 Indian Trail, map 34, parcel K3-2, proposal for a new dwelling. Is there a proponent that can speak to this project?
I see David Clark's name here.
David Clark is supposed to be on here. I'm Steve Hassett, but David's supposed to be the one talking.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there you go.
Yep, okay.
Okay. David Clark on the line. The commission saw this several years ago and issued an order of conditions for this similar house. The property changed hands, and the current owner came before the commission, I believe, last year to get the order extended, and the commission said they would rather see a new notice of intent. So Mr. Hassett has the property under agreement, and this is the house that was developed for his needs, and so the proposal is to build a single-family home. The resource areas are basically an isolated wetland, isolated land subject to isolated land subject to flooding. We show the 50 and 100 foot setbacks from that. We conservatively delineated the limits of the isolated land as the actual wetland vegetation line. That wetland vegetation line was delineated by Blue Flax Design. So the proposal is a single-family home. We have a Title V system that's just outside the 100-foot line. Amy had asked us to add some site coverage numbers to the plan, and for the total site, we have 6.7% coverage between the dwelling, driveway, and other hardscape features. And within the 50 to 100 foot buffer, that coverage is about 24.5%. The total disturbance within the 50 to 100 is 16,800 feet before we do the restoration plantings that are shown on the plan. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Amy, do you have a summary for us, please?
Sure. First, let me see. So first I'll talk about the isolated land subject to flooding. So isolated land subject to flooding is really just that. There's no stream connecting it. It's not a bordering vegetated wetland. It's an isolated depression. And according to the Wetlands Protection Act, they do not, under the act, do not have a buffer zone, but under our bylaw, they do. I spent a little bit of time the past couple of days talking with DEP about this vernal pool, because this isolated land subject to flooding that is on the north side of the property, going on to the next property to the north, is a certified vernal pool, and just basically wanting clarification on how, if the whole thing is vernal or if it's just a portion of that larger isolated wetland is vernal. There could, essentially the vernal pool part could only technically be a portion of that, or it could be the whole thing. And why that is important is what I'm just going to kind of read to you, because it really tells where the wetland lines and the buffer zones are. So this is from Andrew Poignant at Mass DEP. And so vernal pool habitat extends 100 feet from the boundary of a certified vernal pool. And I'll stop for a minute and say that they are looking into when this was certified and the extent of that certification, the size. I have not heard back from them yet. so long as that area is located within a wetland resource area. It is an isolated land subject to flooding. See the definition in 310 CMR 10.04 vernal pool habitat. You are correct that there is no buffer zone to a certified vernal pool. However, the significant habitat may extend 100 feet out from the boundary of the depression if that area is within a wetland resource area. So we kind of need to find out where the boundary of that vernal pool technically is. And my follow-up question to him is, when he says significant habitat, is that the mapped habitat that you see with NHESP, the estimated or priority habitat? Or is he just saying that is significant to wildlife habitat? Because wildlife habitat is one of the interests under the Act for an isolated land subject to flooding. An applicant could be required to do an analysis if they're working in significant wildlife habitat. So we don't know that yet. With respect to isolated land subject to flooding, the maximum extent of the resource area is the area flooded during a 100-year storm event or at the elevation that the pool overtops. It is not just the boundary calculated to demonstrate that the pool holds 1/4 acre foot of water to an average depth of 6 inches during a 1-year storm event. Some consultants try to use the boundary of the annual event as the boundary of ILSF instead of calculating the 100-year extent of flooding or when the pool overtops. So, sorry, that's a lot really convoluted, and I'm happy to send that to the proponent, to David Clark, and he can send it to the other interested parties here if you want to read that over again, because that was quite a mouthful just for me to say. And so I think we have a couple of unanswered questions about this isolated land subject to flooding, and hopefully we can get some answers to that. Putting that aside for the time being, this wetland was delineated by vegetation, by Blue Flax design, not hydric soils or standing water, which is typically fine. Typically, you don't see wetland vegetation, a predominance of it, more if you don't have hydric soils. But because of the vernal pool here, I'm wondering if we want to investigate that a little bit farther. Let's see. Let's see. Sorry. I was going to go over the square footages in the 0 to 50 foot or 50 to 100 foot buffer, but I think David already did that. It's a combination of 3,938 square feet of new hardscape. Planning to revegetate a 10 to 15 foot wide strip landward of the 50 foot buffer. This is one of those properties that we've seen a lot of lately where, we have a mitigation requirement to mitigate for disturbance within a buffer zone. In this case, it's 2 to 1 because it's between the 50 and 100 foot. And when you have a vacant lot, it's really, really hard to do that on that lot. It's a virgin lot. How do you mitigate for it? So, sorry, I have a crying dog in the background. So one question I'll have for you, David, when I finish talking in a minute is, what other options have you considered? Does the driveway have to be asphalt? Could you put the septic system where the driveway could be to decrease disturbance? Can the house be brought closer to the road? What is the terrace made out of, et cetera, et cetera? And then, is there the option for any other type of mitigation that you've looked at? So with that, I'm going to let my dog outside and I will be right back. I apologize.
Thanks, Amy.
So, as far as the septic system, it is as far away from the wetland as possible, and it's outside the 100-foot buffer zone line. Regarding the driveway, I don't see a reason why it couldn't be something other than asphalt. As far as the terrace is concerned, that could be dry laid, so it's semi-pervious. I don't see any issues with that. As far as moving the house further away, right now we are 20 feet from the reserve area of the septic system, and the reserve area is 10 feet from the street layout, so there's no room to move the house closer to the street. And I think that answers all her questions regarding alternatives.
Okay, so it sounds like we can discuss the driveway a little bit further. For now, I'll go down and ask questions to see what the commissioners have. Stan, do you want to start?
Sure. No, I just agree with Amy's comments. I'd like to see something done with the driveway. And so if they can make changes to the material for the driveway, the terrace, that would be good.
Okay, thanks, Stan. Mark?
I'm just curious a little more about the vernal pool and how that's going to impact things here in general. The overall project, I don't have a particular concern. I think it's good to make the driveway permeable, obviously, and same with any other hardscape. But I'm going to reserve any other remarks until we get a little more answer on the vernal pool area.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Okay, Ernie, you're next.
Yeah, when I was out there yesterday, I saw there's a lot of standing water in what's being defined as the isolated wetland, which meets the third requirement for defining it as a wetland. So, it has predominance of wetland vegetation. We haven't tested hydric soils. Water definitely present. So I'm inclined to think that it is a bona fide wetland back there. But nonetheless, I think we need more studies to really define that. That's all.
Okay, thanks, Ernie. Carolyn?
I have no comments right now.
Okay. John?
Yeah, I have questions sort of along the lines of what Ernie was talking about. I went out there yesterday as well, and I saw pretty clearly that the wetland to the west of the lot, there's standing water. I didn't really go back far enough to the north to see what was beyond the markers to the edge of wetland. I didn't see standing water. And then I see on the site plan, there's a small 758 square foot area that's marked as an isolated wetland there. So my question is about the business about annual flood levels versus 100-year flood levels, and whether that applies to all the wetlands around this site, or is it just applying to...
John, it's my understanding that that's primarily for vernal pools.
Which part is the vernal pool, though? I guess that's what...
That's something that I've asked DEP to clarify. Is it really that entire wetland, or is it just a piece of that which could be characterized as vernal, meeting very specific criteria? So it's on a private property. It wasn't done by, my department or the conservation trust that I'm aware of. It was privately done, on somebody else's property. So I don't have those data sheets. I'm trying to get them. My other quick thing was I wasn't meaning to indicate that these weren't wetlands. I was just saying when you look at the 2 out of the 3 criteria for wetland, that's how you would make the landward edge of it, essentially, not I had no disagreement that these were actually wetlands of themselves, and that was to Ernie's point or question there. I just wanted to make sure the delineation was correct. So, yeah, unfortunately, I don't have much more answers on the vernal pool aspect of things for you. I'm hoping to get them very soon.
But nonetheless, potentially that could move the buffer zone, compress where the 50-foot, where you're outside of 50 feet, right?
It kind of also then depends on if it's considered significant habitat. But I think those are things that I can try to flush out with DEP, and I'm happy to include the applicants in on that discussion.
Okay, I just have sort of a minor question about the planting list shown here. Is you're proposing like 75 rather large plants in that area, and I just wondering. I guess my point is I'd like to see a more detailed planting plan than what's here. There's a list and a very there's only a few plants shown on the actual plan, so it'd be good ultimately before we approve this thing to see a more complete planting plan. And that's all I have.
Thanks, John. Jim?
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions, maybe some answers on the vernal pool habitat. For one thing, this is kind of a question for Amy. In our wetland protection regulations, vernal pool habitat is a wetland resource in itself. Correct. Which I've always taken to be 100 feet around a vernal pool.
So it would be under our regulations. We do consider vernal pool a wetland resource area, so it would have a buffer.
Well, no, I mean, I believe it's actually the habitat itself is listed as a resource area, separate from the pool. And and there is no buffer zone for that habitat. However, the habitat, that resource itself, is 100-foot buffer from the edge of the pool. So, okay. So we're not talking, most of this project is not in a buffer zone, it's in a resource area.
I'm going to try to bring that up, okay?
Yeah, I'm looking at it here.
Any other comments, Jim?
Yeah, that's separate from the Massachusetts wetlands protection law, that the town has a stricter regulation on that. Another comment would be that the isolated wetland is almost certainly a vernal pool if it was looked into, and that's part of our task as the commission to look into that and determine that. So that would have if that was determined to be a vernal pool, there'd be another 100-foot habitat resource area around that one. So,
Amy, go ahead, Jim.
So obviously those are important considerations if we're talking about the whole property essentially being a resource area. It changes the mitigation to a 3-to-1 ratio if the variance was granted to alter the resource area.
So actually be a 4.
Or a 4-to-1, yes, yeah. If the variance was granted to alter that. So clarifying that obviously makes a big difference in this proposal. But that's the way I understand these regulations and looking at them. That's the way I've always understood it. That's all.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Very important points. Amy, what do you think the timeline would be to get answers to these questions?
Well, I've started emailing them within the past few days to DEP, and they've been DEP's been very easy to get a hold of. They're all working from home too. So I think we can get some more clarification. So Amy Hainig up at NHESP, I heard from her today. She herself did not have the access to the information on the vernal pools here, but she emailed her boss today who does. So I'm hoping we can get some more clarification on the pools, and then spend a little bit more time on seeing how things meet with the regulations that we have in town under our bylaw and our regulations. Sorry, we don't have that all together for you tonight.
Hey, Amy, can I ask, when you do that research, one other thing I'd like to know too is whether or not this property is in the sewering plan?
Sure.
If it is, then obviously that the septic system and the RA won't have to be planned for, and you can move it significantly closer to the road. So just something to be helpful to know.
It would depend
I understand.
on how trees that's in. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand.
David Clark here. There's no way to move it closer to the road without a Board of Health variance.
And David, you say that because you need the septic system there, obviously.
Correct.
But I'm saying if it were sewered, then you wouldn't need to have a septic system.
Well, it won't be sewered for 5 to 10 years.
That's why I asked Amy to find out when it's going to fall into the plan. Yeah, that's why I asked her to check that.
Yeah, it's not in the phase 2. And so, the town hopefully will vote on the second half of phase 2 this fall. But this is not part of the phase 2 sewer extension.
Okay, all right.
So you've asked for a landscape plan. So you want to see where every individual plant is going? Is that what I'm getting out of this?
Yeah, I think so, but I wonder if we need to hear back on the regulatory issues first. Yeah, because that might shape your footprint. So I wonder if we should hear back.
I agree with that.
First.
I agree. We should probably wait until these other bigger issues get addressed.
Okay. So I guess the question then is when should we seek to continue this too? 2 weeks out, a month out, I'm not quite sure how soon we can expect answers.
I'd recommend that you schedule it for 2 weeks out, and we'll see. Hopefully I'll have some more information by then. Definitely I'll be sharing it with the commission and the applicants in that meantime when I do get it. So I would say for now, let's schedule it for 2 weeks out, and then go from, as we get closer to the meeting, we'll see where we're at. Does that sound good to the applicant?
Yes, David Clark here. So obviously there's a vernal pool there, and there's standing water west of what we've delineated as the edge of the wetland vegetation. So if it turns out that Harwich has a buffer zone to the buffer zone and it's 200 feet, then a majority of this project is within, almost all the project is within 100 feet of where the vernal pool most likely is. I can't see the 1,500 foot lines getting worse than what's shown on the plan because, like I said at the beginning, the vegetated wetland is much more conservative than the actual vernal pool standing water. So that would leave us asking for a variance. So how does the commissioners feel about a variance for this property? Basically, we only have one place where we can put a house. That's where we show it. So what kind of changes would the commission be looking for if we were in a variance situation here?
I would say it's a little premature to speak to that until we have a little more guidance on the regulatory response. So, I mean, that's how I feel anyways. Amy, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to send you down a different path just yet. I think we have too many unanswered questions. And I don't think it's good to give an opinion without that new information.
Well, David Clark again. The reason why I ask is that Mr. Hassett has an investment in this right now. He doesn't own the property. If the commission is looking for hydric soils, which I don't think is warranted in this particular instance, that's going to be additional expenses. And if we're looking at a reduction in the size of the house, I think he needs to know that sooner or later so he can make a decision as to whether he wants to go forward with purchasing this property.
Yeah, that's understandable. I think I think the best we can probably do is just learn what we can for May 6th, and then maybe have some guidance at that point. But there are critical unanswered questions at this point.
David, I'm happy to, whenever I find out new information, I'll make sure that you're party to everything. That way your client you can discuss it with your client and see how you want to move forward, okay?
Okay.
Okay, any comments from the audience? All right, hearing none, I would like to move that we continue the hearing for 46 Indian Trail, map 34, parcel K3-2 until May 6th, 2020. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second that.
Okay, seconded.
I have a question.
Seconded by, sure.
Can we have discussion now? Has the owner been paying taxes on the buildable lot?
Yes, she has. When she purchased the lot, she had an order of conditions to build a house here. And actually at this point in time, I think she has the property on the market for a considerable less amount of money than what she paid for it. So if Mr. Hassett chooses not to go forward, I think the owner is going to be back before you with a similar project and see where it takes her. Because right now she's in a position of possibly having an unbuildable lot.
Thank you.
Who seconded that, please?
I did.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye, starting with myself. Brad, Stan, you're up.
Aye.
Mark?
Aye.
Ernie?
Aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
John?
Aye.
And Jim?
Aye.
Okay, the motion to continue passes unanimously. Thank you very much for your time. Thank you. Next on the agenda, we have a notice of intent for 15 Glendune Road, a proposal related to gas remediation. Is there a representative of the applicant here?
Eric Johnson? Can't hear you, Eric. Hold on, let me try. Can't hear you, Eric. We'll give you a minute. Do you want to try calling in on your phone? You got it?
Still trying, Amy?
Yeah, he's nodding that he's still trying.
Okay. I don't know if it makes any sense to have your summary up front or if that's not really helpful.
Let's give him another minute or two and we'll see. We'll see what else we have on, because we could always do something else real quick while we're waiting.
Well, we have order of conditions up next.
Yeah. Why don't we do a couple of orders, and then Eric, when you're on, just unmute yourself and let us know you're back. Okay. Yeah, let's do orders and conditions.
Okay. Well, if you want to lead us through that.
Sure. Let me get there.
Can you, excuse me, this is Eric. Can you hear me now?
We can.
Thank you, guys. I've never played, what was the game that used to be on TV with the different people in the boxes? Yeah, the squares. Anyway, the technology here is awesome. I compliment whoever pulled this up. This is really good.
It's our team at the town.
Okay. Do you want me to pick up now or just wait?
No, I think go ahead.
Go ahead.
If you could provide us with a summary, please.
All right. So gasoline was spilled into the stormwater system on Sisson Road. It flowed into a swale at 15 Glen Dune. We vacuumed the gasoline out. We excavated contaminated soil and sediment, and we've backfilled. We did seed part of the lawn to control erosion there. And the total area that we disturbed was probably about 3,768 square feet. And we have a series of monitoring wells around the swale to check on groundwater. The samples were taken from the limits of the excavation. Those came up fine. Samples were taken from the perimeter just beyond where we excavated when I put in the wells. And with the exception of one, all the rest came up looking very good, below applicable standards. And so I want to thank you all for allowing us to proceed under an emergency permit. And at this point, we're looking to go through the NOI process, and we've proposed some planting and see if there are any other requirements or concerns that you have.
Okay, thank you. Amy, could you provide us with a summary?
Sure. So the spill occurred on July 18th of last year, and it spilled about 3,825 gallons of gasoline, went into the stormwater system. The immediate response was DEP was there, fire department, health department. A a lot of other agencies responded to this spill, and they did immediate response actions, getting as much of the gas up as they can, flushing the systems. And that was, there was a concern that it got out, from the drainage basin itself, that it had leached. So they've been taking care of that as well. But in regards to the wetland, we'll get into our part. The catch basins that the gas went into lead to a pipe at the southwest corner of the property on Route 28 at the corner of Sisson Road. This property is kind of that beach wares shop that you see. The pipe opens up and leads to a drainage swale that abuts and is on as well 15 Glendune Road. The swale is a bordering vegetated wetland. It is upper reaches of salt marsh leading down to Allen's Creek and Allen's Harbor. The majority of the vegetation at the site where the swale is invasive, primarily Phragmites. It is a flood zone. It is not within priority or estimated habitat for rare endangered species. So after the immediate response, they placed these absorbent pads essentially, and gasoline evaporates and floats. So they're able to get a lot of that out in that way. But some of it did make it into the soil, so that's why they have the monitoring wells there. They did excavate a lot of material, and now we're at the point. Well, this is the after the fact notice of intent was a mandatory step in this process. So here we are with that. I did speak with the DEP official who was assigned to this project that I've met a few times now, Jamie Gonsalves. And I spoke with him in regards to kind of where they were at with DEP. He also is an expert in these type of things. This is the first one, I've ever had to work with. And I wanted to see, my biggest question to Jamie was timeline. How fast do these things typically get resolved? Because in our world, something happening in July and still happening now in terms of an issue like this seems like a long time. However, he assured me that these cleanup projects take at least 3 to 5 years. And that's similar. They had over on the Downey property by Saquatucket Harbor, where there was an old gas station and we had remedial soils. That took several years as well. But this was an event, if you will, that happened, a one-time event, which spilled a lot. So I think we're going on the right track with this. You can look at the data that I sent you, but provided by Eric from Edge Environmental. And the numbers are drastically better than they were before. There is still a spot or two where levels of the compounds are a little bit high. And my biggest kind of question is, at this point, I'm questioning if we're kind of ready to do any plantings or if we should hold off to ensure that no more soils need to get excavated before we do that. And I would like to see more consistent quarterly reports to the Conservation Commission as well on the status of the cleanup, kind of similar to what you provided us, but not, you already did the summaries and whatnot, Eric, but kind of a detailed summary of where levels are at, looking, quarterly and going forward there. So I don't think we're quite ready to plant just yet, but that's just me. I'd like to hear from Eric about that, with how you feel the site is faring. And with conditions, I would recommend granting or approving the notice of intent, and so we can move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Eric, do you have a response to Amy's question?
Great. Yeah, I apologize. I didn't realize you wanted quarterly reports. However, The intent is to continue to monitor and expand on the well network that's out there and on Sisson Road. And quarterly sampling would be completed on a regular basis. Once that data is tabulated, I can certainly send that to you. And one thing that has occurred since we generated the NOI, and that is I collected a sample from a sump below the building at 15 Glen Dune Road, and I did detect some gasoline constituents that exceed the GW1 standard. So let me digress just a moment, see if I can explain this right. So all of the Cape is considered a sole source aquifer by EPA, and therefore all cleanups must meet the most stringent level that Massachusetts has for groundwater, which is GW1. And so basically it's got to be cleaned up until it meets the drinking water standard, or at least averages out to meet the drinking water standards. I did detect some gasoline in the sump at 15 Glen Dune Road. I have a small carbon treatment system being installed out there to treat that water. So basically it's going to get pumped from their basement, run through carbon, and then discharged. That'll clean up any residual gasoline that's in that water. And I've also proposed to put in a couple wells closer to the house to see if the gasoline that's in the sump is coming from the swale, or came from the swale when it was released. I will also be collecting soil samples when I put in those wells, so that would give us an additional idea as to whether any further excavation would be warranted out there. At this point, I feel that's unlikely, and if additional work was necessary out there, it would probably be either monitored natural attenuation or some kind injection of some kind of amendment to oxidize gasoline in place. The concentrations in that area are not that high, and the concentrations in the sump are lower than the GW2 standards. GW2 standards are designed to be protective of indoor air in residential homes. And so we don't have a concern about gasoline partitioning from the groundwater into the basement of this home. So it is unlikely that additional excavation would be completed out there, but we can wait. I would ask then if you would like me to put down some form of wetland seed to stabilize that area more.
My recommendation is yes, regardless. And you had two choices essentially in your packet of information, Eric. And I was going to recommend the first one. I have to find what it is.
Right. One of the mixes is going to do better in an inundated area that's underwater. It can manage that. That's the choice I would put down. Because basically when we have a storm event, that area, the swale, floods. It basically acts as a storage system.
That would be the second one then, the Ernst Conservation Seed Mix.
The wetland mix?
No, that was, I was a little confused about the two actually, because the New England wet mix actually says seeds will not germinate under inundated conditions.
Okay.
I was just recommend that we agree on an appropriate seed mix to put down. We can have that conversation.
Okay. We can do that. Yeah, it appears that I omitted that from the paperwork I provided myself. So sorry about that.
All right, well, at this time, let me ask the other commissioners if they have any questions, starting with Stan.
I'm going to pass at this point.
Okay. Mark?
In a case like this, it would appear you've recovered about 50% of the gasoline that was spilled, more or less. Is that right?
No, actually, I believe we recovered more than that. There's a difficulty in calculating the volume of gasoline that basically gets captured by absorbents. The white absorbent booms that you may have seen out there or seen in other locations generally can absorb up to 10 gallons of petroleum. And, early on when we were removing sorbents and pads, they were heavy with gasoline. So we pumped the gasoline out of the swale and we put down booms and pads, and they would initially get saturated more quickly, and then we would turn them over or replace them on a regular basis. So I had a 15-yard roll-off, about half full of absorbent. And there's unfortunately just no way to, aside from squeezing them out, running them through a roller, or maybe trying to mass them, there's really no way to figure that out. But I think we probably lost somewhere closer to 1,500 gallons, or didn't recover 1,500 gallons.
Okay, I guess that pretty much got to where I was going. Over an extended period of time, as the filtering process continues and the cleanup process continues, what would you expect to recover? Do you think you'll get 2/3, 3/4? I'm looking for an educated guess, really.
I would say we're going to be approaching 20% that we would not recover. So between 15 and 20%. The response was rapid. Additionally, and this is again difficult to quantify, there was gasoline on both sides of Sisson Road near Bud's Go-Karts. And during the fall into December, we would have a pump truck sitting on one side of the road or the other for a couple days a week. And we were removing gasoline and dissolved phase gasoline from those locations. So I don't wish for you to think that 20% of the stuff hit the swale and is somewhere out there alone. There is some gasoline around the swale that's dissolved in groundwater. But I think quite a bit of it basically went into cracks between the road and the curbing, and we're working to recover that. And that recovery effort is going to pick up again at this time.
Just one quick thing too. Jamie wanted me to say, to tell the commission too, that, he's been doing this a long time. He's seen a lot of these spills, that you won't probably get, you're not going to get 100% recovery. And some of that is also due to the fact that the soil itself, the microbes in the soil break down the compounds in the contaminants. So the soil itself is acting to break this contamination down, which was encouraging to hear as well. So, yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And then one other thing, what you said is absolutely correct. There are microbes in the soil that will consume the gasoline, whether there's oxygen in, whether the subsurface is rich in oxygen or poor, i.e. aerobic or anaerobic, they will consume gasoline. The other thing is that gasoline is extremely volatile. And for that reason, even when it was sitting on the road, gasoline was volatilizing into the atmosphere. So there would be plenty of that's unaccounted for by that means.
Any other questions, Mark?
All I've got for now. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Ernie?
Yeah, I have a number of questions. Eric, you mentioned that you were able to pump it out of the swale. How soon after the spill were you able to pump it out? How long did it actually sit there?
For several hours.
Oh, okay, so hours and not days.
Same day.
Yeah,
same day.
Good.
It was pumped out.
Has there been any evidence of the contaminants reaching Allen Harbor or any of the tributaries to that?
No. During the spill, Jamie Gonzalez and I went down to the harbor. We went to the end of Ships Haven Road, and that's actually where water flows from this area in a small stream. We didn't see any gas there. I had booms put there, and they sat there for probably a month, and there really was not gasoline. There was no gasoline on them. They were a little stained, but no evidence of gasoline had gotten through. And Jamie and I also inspected the backyard of 15 Glendune. The swale discharges to the south of the pipe that we show, so the outfall pipe. And I realized only recently that I didn't have that shown on a plan, but I have it now. And basically, we saw no evidence of gasoline in the swale or in the stream bed behind the house. And in the course of doing the excavation work, if you look at Figure 7 or most of the other large-scale plans, where you can see the red soil sample results, we basically excavated until we saw no more gasoline. Then I sampled sample S13. Hold on a second, please. Anyway, we did collect samples from the perimeter of the excavation, and there was only one location close to the pipe that I recall had very much in the way of contamination left there.
Okay.
All right. So basically, I think we did a very good job cleaning the swale up. I have samples from the bottom of the swale, sidewalls, and then from wells proximal to that, and there's very little gasoline detected in soil from the perimeter of that swale.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, I think it does. I'm looking at Table 9 that you attached to the summary of the soil surface water analysis and the analytical results. And at the outfall on 11/21, there was another spike in total xylenes. Can you give me an idea why that happened?
Okay. So that's the only thing that's been detected in samples collected there 3 times. And the outfall is the terminus for a street drainage system. And the street is used by automobiles that leak oil and other things, and streets are actually pretty dirty. That I cannot directly attribute the xylene to the gasoline. Xylenes are a constituent of gasoline, and there's something that we look for, but there were no other indicators of gasoline there, and I didn't test for oil. So it may be from the storm drain system that something migrated through there. It could be from the road, but I can't directly attribute that to one thing or the other.
Okay. On the other chart you have, yeah, go ahead.
Yep. One other thing, the groundwater standard for that is 10,000, and we were detected 14.34. Just to give you an idea.
Versus 10,000.
Yes.
So it's minimal. I mean, it's de minimis, really.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah. All right. And then on table 10, there's a couple of bold numbers that you have in here too, showing, especially I'm concerned about the benzene numbers for 17, 18, 19, and 20. That again appeared to be larger than the other numbers, and it was sort of a persistent over the 10/23 collection date, which is fairly recent, I think, after a number of months after the actual spill itself. Any reason for concern with these?
I'm monitoring them at this point. I believe that they will, dissipate. I had floating gasoline on the surface in the swale, and basically some dissolved gasoline or gasoline can generally make it into the soil even as we're working. But I do anticipate that those will diminish with time. I am also planning on putting in some additional wells to get a better idea as to the extent, in part because these were detected. And so I'm basically doing some more assessment to see how we're doing there. And these wells will be sampled quarterly as well.
Okay. How long
they have been? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
How long? You say they'll be sampled quarterly over what period of time?
I'm proposing for the next year at this point.
All right. Just a personal aside. A number of years ago, we lived in Connecticut, and we're in a house that we got our water from a 200-foot artesian well. And one day when we were drawing water just in the house itself, toilets, faucets, everything else, every time we would take a glass of water or flush a toilet, we got a petroleum sheen across the top of the surface of the water. And we had the DEP out, they looked at it, they could never trace the source of that. But they said that the environment that we're in, and unfortunately we were in an area that had a lot of ledges. So their feeling was that the petroleum could travel miles, the way they put it, over the ledge strata that was in the soil at that point. But my concern is whether or not there are people in that area that might be in a similar situation. Obviously, it's not going outward, but if it goes down and it hits groundwater, if there are people that are on wells or other resources that would draw off of that water table, that they'll see some impact eventually, and no telling when that might happen.
My understanding is, sorry.
Yeah. My question, I guess, was both for you, if you could address that, and also for Amy, if we look to see whether or not there are any people in that area within that half mile, however much, that would draw off the water table there that might eventually see some impact from this.
The health department did look into the question of where there were private drinking water wells, and there are none in this area.
Good. Okay. And Eric, any comments on that?
Sure. We don't have separate phase gasoline here anymore, so there's no longer gasoline floating in the swale, or actually, for that matter, in any of the wells. In the process of sampling these wells, I didn't see a sheen, and I didn't come up with any odors of gasoline. The gasoline does float on water. And so generally we don't consider it to be something that sinks. But if the groundwater has a vertical gradient, it could carry dissolved gasoline to greater depths. Based on the location, you know, the swale itself, if you go out to look at the swale after we haven't had rain for a while, the only place you tend to see water is very close to the discharge pipe from the storm drain system. And that is an expression of groundwater in the area. Groundwater is quite shallow. So I would not anticipate seeing the gasoline going to substantially greater depths than what we're seeing right now, which is probably 5 feet below grade. And in terms of the extent, let me digress for a moment. Without trying to overcomplicate things, there are times when this drainage swale will act to discharge water from the surrounding formation, yards, etc., and into the swale. That's when groundwater is high. And there are times when, like after a tremendous storm, where water is going to flow from the street and fill the swale, and then water will discharge from the swale into the surrounding formation. So there will be some agitation or back and forth flow of groundwater in the immediate vicinity of that swale. When water is discharged off the road, if there isn't, you know, a lot of petroleum in it, then it's basically going to dilute what's there. And that's, okay, you know, that's something I really can't obviously control. I mean, if we've had some pretty good rain lately, and I'm sure the swale has standing water in it.
Good. And one last, I'm sorry, that's great. I appreciate that. The one last question I had was in the section of your write-up that addresses stormwater management, the first paragraph under 5.0, you talk about how there was growth of vegetation and accumulation of debris that clogged and raised the elevation of the channel. And it generally, the effect was to inadvertently cause the swale to become a retention pond. Was that good for this particular incident?
Yes, that was fantastic because, okay, you know, basically the gasoline was trapped in this area. And as I stated, we went, you know, if you look at the figure, you can see if you assume that Glendune Road is the front side of 15 Glendune, and you look at where the back of the home is, or this would be to the east of the house, we had no evidence of gasoline there. And that's because there was a buildup of material that trapped the gasoline in that location. Otherwise, it would have probably made it all the way out to Allen's Harbor.
So I guess my follow-up to that would be, should this swale actually be a retention pond?
Well, we excavated the impacted soil out of there, and then we backfilled with some native sand, and then we backfilled with about 6 inches of a very rich organic mixture. I don't remember the company's name other than, I think it's Nicholson. They had a topsoil mix, which they then added additional organics to, and that's what we put on top of that swale area. But we didn't change the elevation where I would say you have an outfall, or not the outfall, where the swale would discharge and flow behind 11 Glendune. We didn't change that elevation, so that still happens today.
But in your professional opinion, would we be better having a retention pond regarding in future incidents like this, or just natural petroleum coming off of the roads and that sort of thing, as opposed to a swale? I'm sorry, did you hear me, Eric?
I did, but you've set my gears turning here. That's not a quickly answered question. So it's basically, part of, inadvertently, it's become part of the stormwater management there. If you were there early on, after, like immediately after a rain, but right after it started, you can stand at the outfall pipe and watch water flow into the swale. It gets to a certain level, and then it cuts off to the right or to the west, and it starts to fill that. So it's behaving as that right now. If you had another catastrophic release, it would be a plus. I think that when the state put in the storm drain system, they may have anticipated that and created that area to act like a bit of a retention pond. But I think the real reason that water doesn't flow through more readily is because there's so much detritus in the discharge channel that it's just clogged up. So without changing, we don't have to change any of the wetland if we leave it sort of as is. I don't have a quick answer for you, even as I'm speaking. It's not coming to me, so sorry.
Well, maybe you could think about that and perhaps get back to Amy and let her know what your thoughts are on that. I mean, if that's going to be a prophylactic for a future event that might happen, then we'll have to change the big point of that if we can, Amy.
Okay.
And what we're trying to do, the town as a whole, is to eliminate a lot of these old discharges. This has been in there for probably well over 50 years when environmental standards weren't, what they are today. So the town, and it happened on Sisson Road, and there were our basins, but it connected to the state, obviously, as well. And trying to improve these discharges so we don't have a release like this.
Well, all right, just a quick note. Some towns require storm or catch basins near gasoline stations to have something called a hood.
Yep.
And it basically does two things. One is it captures debris and floats them, jets them from the road, bottles, plastic bottles, things like that. It captures them before they enter the system. And it also acts as an oil water separator and prevents gasoline from basically migrating beyond the catch basin, because if it's designed and set up to work correctly, the hood prevents gasoline from flowing up through the pipe. And it's based on the principle that gasoline floats on water and that water is retained in the catch basin.
Interesting. Yeah. Obviously, with the catch basins so close to a critical resource area in the town, Amy, that almost sounds like something that might be worth looking into then.
Sure.
That's all I have. Thank you.
Just one note, and that is that when you have catch basins that are set up that way, they have to be maintained, and that's an ongoing problem in many, many towns and on the highways that we see. People just don't maintain catch basins that well. Anything else?
I'm done. Thank you.
Brad, are you there?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. Thanks, Ernie, for those questions. Next, Carolyn.
I'm not sure if the town would be, or the mosquito control people would be real happy about forming a standing water catch basin in that location. I think that filter sounds like a much better idea, but right now, if we can't buy a pencil, I don't know if the town's going to be too happy to be entertaining that thought. I was out at the site today and I was sorely missing Amy's expertise to explain to me what I was looking at. And I thought I was looking at the swale we are talking about, but only a few of Eric Johnson's comments sounded like what I looked at. There was a lot of standing water where I was looking, and there was a film on the top of the water too. It wasn't clear. There was something there that shouldn't have been there. It didn't seem, I was there in the sunshine and it didn't seem to have the colors that I associate with a float of gasoline on water, but there was some foreign material in that water. I don't see how any of these plantings would work the way it looks right now. Maybe you could me on that.
Well, all right, if I might, you were looking for the right thing on the water surface, and that would be a rainbow or a sheen. And sometimes there are scum layers as well, and maybe you know, because think about it, when you have a rainfall and then all the dust that's on the road flows into the system, and some of that is going to, you know, stay on top of the water.
I can understand that, but I don't see how a plant is going to grow there.
Yeah, I don't think we're ready to be planting just yet if there is standing water. I think we got to monitor the situation a little bit more. Eric and I can meet down at the site again, I'm sure as well, and reevaluate that.
Okay.
That's all I have to say.
Thanks, Karen. Next, John.
Yeah, I have a few questions. First is, it's pretty apparent that the basic structure of that swale extends significantly to the west. There's like a berm at the end of Glendoon Road that separates the swale that you illustrate in your report from a trench that extends westward behind whatever buildings are between there and Route 28. And I didn't see anything in the report about whether you investigated whether any of the spilled over and into that extended wetland that goes to the west. And I'm wondering whether there's some hydrological connection or a real physical connection, like a pipe that may or may not be known to anyone, that at least hydrologically connects those two things, and what you did to investigate that possibility.
When the gasoline was on the surface of the swale, it did extend almost to that, what do you want to call it, a berm? We didn't put that berm there. It was pre-existing, but I did remove soil from the area that was impacted, and then put back other material. I didn't see a pipe, as you say, that connected the rest of the trench further west from the swale itself. I basically, there's been standing water in that, and I've looked at it and only ever seen bacterial sheens. So I have done nothing to investigate beyond that berm. After we were done, I did collect a sample from water from that end of the swale, and it came up non-detect. So I assumed I had taken care of things there.
So you've tested the water, but you haven't tested the soils in that trench.
I tested the soil in the swale, but not beyond the end of the swale. So not in the trench that it heads further west.
So how can you be confident that there wasn't and isn't pollutants from the spill that have worked their way west from where that berm or earth boundary or whatever you want to call it is? I would think, I mean, you apparently looked at what was downstream from the southern end, but for some reason you didn't look west. And I'm just wondering, how do we know that there isn't a problem there too?
Well, I did look west, and during the remediation and following up to that, I looked there multiple times for evidence of gasoline. If you say look, you mean by analyze. That's a different animal, and I have not done that. But I do. If you look at Table 8, which is a summary of the swale analytical results.
Okay.
Right, I have 13 samples from the limits of where we excavated, and those all came up well below the applicable standard. And the standard that applies here is S1 GW1. That is the most stringent standard for soil.
So, I'm sorry, I missed your point here. What are you saying? I'm looking at.
So, okay, if you look at that table, what you're seeing are soil samples collected from the limit of the excavation when we were digging out the swale. Okay.
So these column headings relate to points on the site plan?
Yes, there's a plan that summarizes the swale analytical results, I believe.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. So would you please take a look at Figure 6 for just a moment?
Yep.
All right. On the western end of the swale, you'll see in red a red sample point with an S8.
Yep.
All right. And then if we go back to the table and you go along the sample ID row, you'll see sample S8.
Okay.
Okay. And then as you look down the column, you can see the detection limits that the laboratory provided. And actually, I stand corrected, and one thing was detected. There was some toluene detected at 0.233 milligrams per kilogram. And the standard it's compared to, the most stringent standard, is 30.
Okay. So your point here is that since at that point you didn't see anything in the soil samples that raised issues, so you assumed that looking further west was not called for.
That's correct.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment, which is, it's a little thing, but it's still a comment I'm going to make, which is in this report, you're using acronyms, which I assume no one except subject matter experts know what they mean. It's always good to expand acronyms so that people like commissioners on the Conservation Commission know what they are, so we get a little more out of the reports.
I would like to apologize for that. I have actually tried to to limit the techno speak in my reports, but I will take that to heart. My goal is to write things that people can follow and understand. I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question that just puzzled me about the report and reading the details of your protocol for testing, which maybe you can enlighten me a little bit, which is you're describing two sorts of samples you take. And I take them to be, you're taking a soil sample, putting it in an airtight bag, and looking at the volatilized fractions that actually come off the soil into the air. And on my reading of this, you had a lot of samples that had significant volatilized components in gaseous components that you analyzed, but then you took a sample from the same place and put it in a bag and went through a whole protocol to freeze it and send it to a test lab to see what was in the soil. And a lot of those things where you found some gaseous pollutant components in the initial test, you didn't find anything significant in the soil, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense to me, and maybe you can explain that to me.
Basically, you've hit upon a weakness in the process that we use. Basically, I collect the soil from a location, and I basically fill two bags, and I take one bag, and like you said, I let it equilibrate, and I screen it with an instrument in the field. The second sample is put on ice until I determine from that sample point or not whether or not I'm going to send it to the lab. And one of the things that happens is when I'm opening the bag to take out soil, I lose some volatiles. And then I basically take the soil out and I inject a measured amount into methanol, which is a reagent, and it preserves the sample, and it starts to extract the volatiles at that time. But there's always going to be some form of loss over time. And it's also a function of two different methods. One is just a screening method. The other is an actual analytical method. The screening method that I provide doesn't provide concentrations. There are units per flow rate of air. The other is a serious, accurate laboratory concentration based on the weight of the soil and the weight of the compounds detected. So it's in part a differentiation between two different methods that are used. And it's also a function of time and sample preparation. And I know that's not a great explanation for this, but it's something that we have, over time, we have improved our sampling methods. And when I say we, I mean the industry as a whole. And by using methanol for an instant extraction method, it works much better than it used to, but we still, screening with the PID is not apples to apples with running samples at a laboratory. And I'm afraid that's the best I can do for you.
So, part of my understanding, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, is that when you take a soil sample and you can't really avoid exposing the surface of the soil sample, and particularly if it's a relatively small sample, to the air, in which case the volatiles in there pretty quickly evaporate and they're not there anymore. So by the time you get it to lab, even though you've taken all this care, you've lost a lot of what was in there, as opposed to what happens in the actual ground where, as you say, the various fractions of gasoline float on water, so they get trapped between the surface of the groundwater and the soil, and they stay there. So my question is, even though you've gone through this very careful process, how can we really be confident that there isn't still a lot of very difficult to measure gasoline stuck there between the top of the groundwater and the soil overlaying it?
I would say that we have multiple samples that are used to characterize the extent. The sampling process involves a very limited amount of time for the volatiles to escape from the soil, because I in the field, I take soil and I put it in methanol, and then that's sealed in a VOA vial with a Teflon septa or cap, and it basically seals what's ever placed into that container in there. And that's the industry standard at this time. And I don't have a better way.
Okay, so, but you're confident that when you measure in a soil sample, as Ernie would put it, de minimis amounts of whatever fraction you're talking about, you're confident that that's reasonably reflective of what's actually in the soil and remaining there?
Yes, but one thing you said holds very true, and that is I collect a sample from one location and I basically put that in a container. Soil is generally heterogeneous, right? So the amounts that can be present will vary. So for that reason, we collect multiple samples to provide a better spread or characterization of an area. But, you know, what I put in a VOA vial right there on site, you know, after taking the sample, it's only 9 milligrams. But that's the standard.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
All right, thanks, John. Jim, you're next.
Yeah. Well, to me, the cleanup and the replanting plan seemed to be reasonable. However, this was a large spill, and I think some of the impacts are just unavoidable. You just can't get it all out of the soil or the water. It's just not realistic. And if Amy's still there, my question for her is, does the town have any recourse for those impacts as far as compensating mitigation or fines of some kind? I seem to recall coming across a large wetlands restoration project off Cape and reading that it was funded by compensation for a fuel spill similar to this. I just haven't heard anything about that in relation to this spill. So it's just a question for Amy. Does the town have any recourse for this pollution?
That is something I don't know off the top of my head. I know that the town hasn't, to my knowledge, the town hasn't sought any recourse, but it's something I can chat with the town administrator about, and the other parties who are really involved, like the water department and health department. But I don't know what recourse the town has.
Yeah, I'd say the conservation department would be a relevant party because some of those impacts were to the marsh and the wetland in that area and the harbor. And I do recall, I'll have to dig that up. That information I saw earlier, it's been so long since the spill happened that I don't have it today. But that was my comment.
Okay, thanks, Jim. I'm going to ask at this time if there are any comments from the audience. Okay. Okay, hearing none, I guess, Amy, this is emergency notice of intent. What's the process moving forward? It seems like there's still some things we need to learn.
Yep.
Is this just something to be continued?
No, I think it is something that you can vote on to approve. I think we would draft the order of conditions in such a way that would require continual monitoring. I know Eric had said a year. Typically, our monitoring reports for projects are longer than that. They're 3 years. But we can see where we're at with 1 year at quarterly monitoring and maybe decrease that to biannually after that. We can kind of see. I don't think we should do planting at this time. So this was an emergency certification, which required the filing of a notice of intent. So it's really just part of the process. And it's a good part of the process because it brings this all to you to know what's going on, so you have a say in it. So there's no, in my mind, no need to continue necessarily because, at any time we can have this quarterly reports, we could ask for another status update, kind of conference call like this with Eric if you see need to, but this is just a piece of the puzzle to move forward with this. There's no downside to not moving on this tonight.
Okay. And your thoughts on the planting plan? Fully suitable species, numbers, spacing, everything's okay?
When it was dry, completely when it was drier, I would say yes, but it would be something now that we have a wet spring. Eric, maybe we can go meet out on site and decide if that needs to be changed at all. And you might be looking at a fall planting. We can kind of see where the readings and everything leads us through the summer. But I don't think you're looking at a spring planting. I don't want to marry us to this particular planting plan just yet, but the idea is good.
Okay. Has there been discussions of red cedar as one of the species to put at this location?
I think it's too wet.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's too wet, even on the berm.
All right, then. Then I guess I'll ask.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, please. You still have a comment?
There was considerable water in there today, and is the outflow clogged now?
I don't know if it's clogged as we speak.
There was a lot in the water. The water was pretty much standing still. Then the debris was not moving. So until that gets unclogged, I don't see how these plantings can take place.
The planting would take place when the water table is lower and the rainfall frequency diminishes.
And then next spring?
I'm sorry?
And then next spring when we have rain again or snow in the winter?
Then they would be covered.
Yeah, I think we need to maybe monitor this for a couple more seasons just to ensure that these plantings are going to work, and then we'll augment that if need be. Because as you said, it is too wet for most of them right now. But honestly, it's so congested with Phragmites all throughout there. I mean, I want to say that these plants will make it for a while, but they're going to be completely surrounded by Phragmites, which is unfortunate.
Would we do better to require mitigation someplace else to get rid of Phragmites to hopefully open up this stream?
I don't know if opening it up is necessarily a great idea either right now. So I think those are more things that need to be looked at before we take action on them.
Okay. Thank you.
And Amy, a little bit more on Jim's question about other forms of mitigation or remediation. Are there any fines? Are there any DP responses that would lead to environmental mitigation?
I have not heard of any from Jamie. Maybe Eric can speak to that a little bit more. I think, we were also focused on the cleanup and whatnot, that we didn't get to that, to finding the company. And Eric doesn't work for the company. He's the cleanup specialist. But I don't have the answer right now. I could talk with the town about things.
Right. So far, what I'm aware of is the U.S. Coast Guard has fined Delaney Fuel for this spill. And then beyond that, it's, fines might be levied against the trucking firm depending on the cause of the accident. Mm-hmm. Often they will either they might also require training or changing of health and safety plans, training plans for the trucking firm. But the fire department and the state fire marshal, there were many agencies here, and the police department, the fire departments have all been reimbursed for their time, and the rest of the cleanup has been borne by Delaney Fuel and its insurance.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a recommendation from Amy to act on this emergency notice of intent tonight. Any last discussion on that concept before we go forward? Okay, hearing none, I'm going to motion that we approve the emergency notice of intent for 15 Glendune Road on gas remediation. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, seconded by Mark. Any further discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to roll call a vote. All those in favor say aye. I vote aye. Brad Chase. Next is Stan.
Aye, Stan Bestuzak.
Okay, Mark.
Aye, Mark Coleman.
Ernie.
Aye, Freddie Crabtree.
Carolyn.
Aye, Carolyn O'Leary.
John.
Aye, John Ketchum.
And Jim.
Aye, Jim Donovan.
Okay, the vote is unanimous. The emergency notice of intent is approved. Thank you all for a very good discussion.
I hope I've satisfied you your answers, and I suppose I will make sure you guys get quarterly updates. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. As soon as we can, we will. Can't be in the office right now. So as soon as we can, we'll get the permits out to you and we'll touch base with the monitoring, okay?
Okay, thank you. Bye.
All right, thank you. Okay, I think that ends the NOIs for tonight. So we're moving on to order of conditions.
Yep.
Do you just want to go down the list, Amy, and give us a quick description? Or I guess, see, I was not able to access Dropbox, so I guess if you can give us a quick rundown, and we'll ask for comments.
Sure. Well, the first one for Thomas Smith at 52 North Road, we're not ready for that yet. He had submitted the applications to DEP a little bit late, so he doesn't have a number yet. So we don't need to continue this or anything. We're just going to put it on the next meeting. It's not a hearing. So that one's not ready. The next one is for Christian Davenport at 0 Old Campground Road. Does anybody have any comments?
Sammy, I noted one typo at the last item on the document, item number 11. you have an as-built site, S-I-T-E, it should be plan. That's all.
Thank you. Hold on one second. I got to get into that. Document.
You spelled it S-I-G-H-T plan.
Well,
And that's all. There's a couple more that have that too.
oh, geez.
That's all.
All right. That one was. All right. Let me open that. Let's fix it right here. It's just the wrong type of site. Okay, got it.
I have no comments.
That's for, so we're still, or no more comments for 12 Old Campground? Okay. Do you want me to run through them, Brad, and we can have one vote for all of them?
I think that makes sense. I think we should do it that way. Sure.
That's fine. So next would be, of course, I'm not in the right folder anymore. What's the next one?
Harwich.
All right, so that's 33 Snowman Road.
Yes.
Anybody have any comments on Vin Helfrich's order of conditions at 33 Snowman Road?
So for both of those, 23 and 33, they say the work is to be complete by April 1. As of yesterday, there was still a barge and a crane right over there. What's going on?
I talked to Ben Helfrich last week or the couple of days before, and he said, I asked him that question. He's a neighbor. I asked him that question, and he said all the in-water work was completed by April 1st.
They're using the barge to work on the boathouse, John, still, but all in water and doing some work behind structures, but all the in-water work is done.
Okay.
It looked like they were dredging the channel into the harbor too.
They might have been doing, they have a dredge permit that might have, they had told me that they were going to do it sometime this spring, but I don't know when, but I can check on that.
Yeah, because there was a dump truck at the marina across the road, across the harbor, and they were filling up there. I mean, it was just a bucket. It was just taking it out of the channel.
Yep. Winchmere does have a maintenance dredge permit. And I knew that they were going to sometime this spring.
Sorry, Amy, does that permit have a time of year restriction? There should not be April dredging.
Right. Potentially. I mean, I know the town has has exemptions, but let me talk to Winchmere. I'll reach out to them tomorrow.
Yeah, I'd be willing to bet a buck that they were actually dredging that channel. And it's been going on for a couple of weeks now, I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just curious because I'm pretty sure state and federal permits just would not allow exemptions in April for that. There's too much going on.
Where do you think they're putting the sand?
What's that?
Packing it offsite.
I haven't seen any piles of sand or any indication of a big pipe taking sand someplace.
It's not the town doing it. So if it's Winchmere, they usually contract with Robert Hour Company. Robert Hour Company could be bringing that material to their pit. It doesn't necessarily go right on beaches.
Well, I haven't seen any big trucks down around there, and I walk by there at least once a day.
Yeah, Amy, if you could check on that permit situation.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of marine life that's active in the month of April that those exemptions aren't often given.
Hey, Amy, I do have some other comments on the order of conditions, though. Under the and both of them, both for 33 and 23.
Okay.
Under the general conditions, numbers 1, 2, and 3 are sort of a before the fact wording, and this has already been granted. They're already in process. It's already been done.
Yeah.
Do you have to reword that?
I kind of wrote it as if it hadn't been done yet.
Yeah, I know.
I wrote it as if they were to follow these things, which they did do.
You'd make no mention anywhere in here either that this work is being done under an emergency order.
I'll change that. I'll put that right at, okay. Under permit on the first page, that's a good point. I'll change that. I'll say that this work was allowed under an emergency permit. Yes.
And you might even put the date that it was granted.
I will.
That sort of stuff.
I'll include a copy of it too.
All right.
Notification and is an after the fact order of conditions.
Yeah. Yeah. And the only other comment I had was the last item again is you had your site SIGHC.
Okay. This one in the 23 snow in, I changed that.
Okay.
I have a couple comments on 23.
Okay, any more on 33 before we go to that?
I've got a common question for the two of them since I don't have them before me. Is the language on the shellfish mitigation consistent with what we discussed and I think John framed very well at the last hearing? Can somebody
I have
just
special condition number 9. I can read it for you, Brad.
Yeah, it'd be great.
Well, I have a question about that, Amy. Actually, can I ask first? Because in reading that, I question whether that should even be included. Maybe just say put into the shellfish fund or whatever we call it, mitigation fund, and then keep that ability for us to decide where to go without making that public.
That's not what we voted on.
Yeah.
That's not what we voted on.
You said 2,500. So each applicant had 2,500. And half of that was to go to the Shellfish Mitigation Fund and half of the funding towards habitat restoration. That's what you voted on. And I said, Brad, that this shall be provided, meaning the mitigation funding by January 1st, 2021.
Okay.
I'd say that, Amy, rather than saying this shall be provided by, I'd just say the mitigation funding shall be paid by. It's a little clearer, I think, in this.
Yep. Okay.
Carolyn, what was your concern with the language that was there?
I think it's internal business, housekeeping, and not necessarily part of an official legal document. I think if we ended up giving 49% and 51%, I think it just unnecessarily complicated it, and that should be in the mission of the Shellfish Mitigation Fund for us to be able to distribute it as we feel proper. We decided in this case 50-50, but I don't see why it has to be part of a legal document.
Yeah, no, I appreciate
to that. You can't hold them to it if it's not in there.
Well, I think we could hold them to the $2,500 and it should be in there. But where we dispense it, I'm not sure it has to be in there.
That's what the motion was to approve it, was 50-50. So that's how I vote.
Yeah, I appreciate your thoughts, Carolyn. I just think it is important to document it because things change, personnel changes. You know, who knows how many of us will be here 4 years from now. You know, things change. So I think it is important to document it. And then secondly, we did in fact vote on that structure. So I think it's important that it does get put in.
Okay.
Okay, well, I have no further comments on those two.
Number 4, the first sentence, a steel overwash bulkhead is permitted immediately in front. I think you can delete that first in.
Are you on 33 or 23?
I'm on 23.
Okay.
Special conditions number 4.
All right, hold on. Got to open up that one. Just easier for me to fix it while we're right here.
Yeah, we get a note saying Amy has saved a new version.
Yeah. Number.
Special conditions number 4, first sentence.
I got it. Yeah.
And my other question is also in number 4. There shall be no encroachment into the navigable channel.
Correct.
With new structures. Now, we didn't approve anything along the channel for them.
Correct.
Okay, so it is the first 3 feet of that channel closest to the building considered navigable channel? That entire channel goes from building to docks on the other side? Or could that be construed as, well, we're putting it 3 feet from the building, it's not navigable?
John Rendon for Witchmere in particular, that entire width navigable.
Okay, that was my question.
Not included by structures.
That was my question. That's it.
Okay. Anything else for 23 or 33, Snow Inn Road? Okay. Can I move on to, 31 Mill? Any comments on 31 Mill Road order of conditions?
Okay, hearing none. Are we ready for a motion for all?
Yeah, would you mind just announcing all of the addresses minus 52 North Road, Brad, and then asking for the vote?
Okay, so I'd like to make a motion to approve the order of conditions for the following 4 orders. 0 Old Campground Road, map 30, parcel C11. 33 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P3. 23 Snow Inn Road, map 8, parcel P2, and finally 31 Mill Road, map 15, parcel U3. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay, seconded by John. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Starting
Aye.
myself. Aye. Okay, that sounded unanimous to me.
Okay. Next, we have a discussion item on for tree removal within the buffer zone to a wetland at 8 Shady Drive. In a minute, I'll see if the owners are on the phone. But first, Mr. Chair, would you like me to just go over briefly the events?
Sure, please.
And obviously the owners will be able to weigh in immediately after me. But so I was notified that tree cutting was happening at 8 Shady Drive about 2 weeks ago. It abuts a pond with a bordering vegetated wetland. So no permits had been pulled. I got to the site and saw Draper Landscaping had removed 5 trees within the buffer zone to the pond. Anne Leclerc, the owner, came out of the house and said the trees had sustained damage from the tornado. Draper Landscaping said they contacted my office, but neither Nicole, the assistant agent, or I recall this. We would have went to the site to confirm that the trees were damaged beyond saving, and if they were in bad shape, we would have had them do an administrative review. at the state, after the tornado, did do a disaster declaration for DEP and gave essentially 30 days after that to clean up without permits. We extended that. We didn't feel like it was in the right spirit, if you will, if the trees were truly damaged by tornadoes, that people should have to pay additional fees on top of tree removal fees. But we did ask that people still filled out the administrative review, let us know, we would double check it. So I discussed, there was no way for me to really tell by the time I got there. The trees had been chipped. They were finishing up. There was really no way for me to tell what the trees had looked like prior. I mean, this area did get hit pretty hard. We had seen the abutting property for a filing not too long before, within the year. And we saw that property had a lot of damage. But I thought it was a good idea to have the LeClairs and hopefully Draper Landscaping on the call here, and they can kind of walk you through it and we can figure out where we're going from there. I do recommend at least some replanting. So I'll leave it at that. And Mr. Chair, if it's all right with you, if either the LeClairs or Draper Landscaping are on, if they want to unmute themselves.
Is anybody present?
Who's caller number 1? Oh, that's you, Brad.
Okay.
Right? No.
I'm not sure.
I did invite them and gave them the login information, and I hesitate to have too much conversation without them, but if you want to ask me some questions to ask them, or you can try to get them on for the next meeting.
Okay. I would say if anybody has any specific questions, go ahead and ask Amy. Otherwise, there's not too much we can do with this.
Amy, can you just repeat the date at which you visited the site when they were just finishing up?
I'm not exactly sure. It's on my calendar at work in my office. It was actually just prior to, it was like 2 days prior to our last meeting. So our meeting was April 2nd. So it was a couple days prior to that.
Wait a minute, I'm confused. That's when you visited the site and they were just completing work of chipping trees?
Yes. They had just cut the trees and chipped them.
At the beginning of April? Didn't we visit that site after the trees had been?
It was probably it was one of the last days of March.
Oh.
This is not the property that we looked at that they cut all the trees.
No. This was 5.
Drive, right.
This is the one next door to it, right? The property that we were looking at.
So this is on a pond. It's next door to the property. It's the lot next door is a 10,000 square foot lot.
Right.
It was one Speakman who came in.
To
put a 1-bedroom single family house on it. It's the property to the north of that immediately.
Right. Okay. I'm sorry. I was thinking of the one on Nantucket Sound, a very different thing, right?
Oh no. This was not nearly as egregious.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
But they were, we're at 5. Go ahead.
It could have been tornado damage, and I don't think we should spend a whole lot of time on this or find them.
I think there should be some replanting. There really is almost no other vegetation there. I saw they had 1 or 2 other trees on the property that had a limb damaged. And while I was there, they asked me if they could remove it, and I just limb. So because I got there I was notified, and I went down within a half an hour. I was able to get there within a half an hour of being notified of the work, but they had been clearly working all day. They had a crew of 4, 5, 6 guys down there.
Well, what was the timeline for doing work after the tornado? A month or two? Not 9 months or so?
Right. But I mean, I know Nikki and I didn't talk to the landscaper. He said, he'd reached out and he had said there was it was tornado damage. And I do believe that there was probably some tornado damage based on what the other lots in that area looked like after the tornado. I'm okay with no fine because we really don't know what happened. But I do think the best thing environmentally is to beef up that buffer zone, which is there's maybe 1 or 2, there's a couple trees left, but other than that, it's just pretty much lawn down to the water. And I think they seemed amenable to that when I spoke with them, both on site and on the phone.
Okay, yeah, if they agreed to that, that sounds good.
How do we do that? Do we need to do anything, or can you just talk to them and ask them? And
I would want a vote from you to ask them to replant with do some replanting with my guidance, and I could report on to you with what that is. I would say at least I'd like to see another tree or 2 brought back there, and probably 2 to 1 with shrubs, so maybe another 10 shrubs, couple trees.
I'm okay with that.
I would support that act.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
Okay.
So what is the number, Amy, that you want? The number and species?
2 trees, 10 shrubs.
Okay, what species?
I don't know off the top of my head just yet.
How many trees came down? I'm sorry.
5. Large, like.
Why wouldn't we ask 5 trees back in and some additional?
I think it needs a shrub. There is no shrub layer there. There are some other additional trees. I was trying to diversify it a little bit while also some of the trees were in closer proximity to their house. It's a small lot. I didn't want to create a future problem for them necessarily either. Mm-hmm. But if you want different numbers, let me know.
No, I understand.
Hey, Amy, question for you. Did you look on Google Maps, see if you could see if they were down over the last 9 months?
No, I actually didn't think of that.
Why don't you give that a shot to see if anything's green or not?
Yeah. Well, I can
that's
do that.
That's my one concern is that somebody alleged something that didn't really happen. So that is concerning to me. I like Mark's idea. I think if you could boost it up to a 3rd tree, that would make sense to me.
Okay.
All right. So this would take the form not of a enforcement action, would it? It would just be.
No, it would.
It would be, okay.
In order for us to hold them to it, it has to be, but it's not going to be. If it's okay with you, there'll be no fine. It'll just be an enforcement order to do this planting.
Okay.
Either this spring, ideally this spring, but with the state of everything going on, plants are, if they can't find the plants we want, I'd say fall is fine.
Okay. Well, then I'm going to move that we approve an enforcement order for 8 Shady Drive to have the owner provide 3 trees planted and 10 shrubs based on discussions with the conservation agent. Could I please have a second?
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the motion? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's unanimous approval. All right, thanks, Amy, for working on that.
Sure. I got one more item on the agenda for erosion at the east end of Red River Beach. You wanted me to put this on this agenda instead of talking about it last time when we were all exhausted after 4 hours. So the storm that we had didn't do it any help down there. I hope you had a chance to go down and see it. The filter fabric that was installed under an emergency certification, there used to be sandbags over that too, but those were gone within the first year. But the filter fabric's exposed, so we're basically eroded back to the point where we were 7 years ago. 8 years ago. And we're in serious threat of having an impact to that paved edge there. I have reached out to Brewster about Paynes Creek. I actually went there this weekend myself to remind myself, and that's an awful lot of bit of rock down there, not just along the creek channel, but on the beach itself. But that being said, that's permitting farther down the line. Wanted to see, I think we have an argument for another emergency certification here for public health and safety. But, seeing as how we don't want to put sand over there because it's silting in the river, I wanted to see what ideas you had for what we can do in the short term while we pursue other options for a long-term solution here. I had a thought that I don't know if you're going to like. You want to hear it?
Yeah, absolutely.
How else would we know if we like it or not?
I know. I almost hesitate to say it because we stopped this years ago. It had been past practice for 10 plus years to take the seaweed that's on the beach and dump it over that edge. I mean, sand itself silts in that river, but seaweed is biodegradable. And codium, as you know, once it dries out, it goes away pretty quickly. So maybe a bad idea, but it was an idea that I had to temporarily, we had a ton of seaweed come in, is to put that over the edge there to stave off additional erosion. But
Amy, let me ask you, how far can we go with, a little bit harder solutions under emergency order? Could you put a row of toe stones?
I think
that
so.
Pushing?
I think at this point we should push it.
Yeah.
I think just a row of toe stones is something that we could see as something temporary because they could be taken out very easily.
Right.
As opposed to a wall that's, a full wall that's really engineered into place. But I think we have some granite blocks. I think we have some large stone. If you wanted me to have highway to do that. And then I would recommend a little bit of a top dressing of sand on top of that because I think we're heading towards a real nuisance with that filter fabric and that slope being exposed. People are just running right down there.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a tough one. Let's go back to the comments by each member on this one. I think it's a really important issue that we've gone through before. And just up front, I think the codium would be kind of a fleeting response. So I think I favor like large toe stones that could be removed. So I think that's certainly one idea. But let's start with Stan and go down the line.
Yeah, I walk that way all the time. Matter of fact, I was there at low tide. I mean,
Yeah, I saw you.
Yeah. I mean, that river is always changing. That whole end. Matter of fact, since the last time I went a few weeks ago, it cut right through so that the flow of the river really is going straight through that sandbar where for a long time it was cutting to the east.
Yeah.
And I mean, that east of the river now is going to be all beach there. It's filling in. And I think with the flow cutting straight down, again, I'm not an expert at any of this, but I would think it would cause a stronger flow towards that where the revetment is.
It's definitely a higher velocity area where the rocks are would be. That's the way the river wants to meander. And
but I mean, now that it's cutting through again, I think that's even going to make it even stronger, is in my opinion, anyway. So yeah, I'm in favor of we got to do something there, or lose that corner of the lot. I mean, that river's been cutting to the west of the revetment that's out there. Even the channel is going further west. So yeah, it's going to impact that area that we're talking about even more.
Yeah.
That's all.
Thanks, Mark.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
The idea of the tow stones as a break, I think, is a great idea. And I really don't see a reason not to back it up with the surplus seaweed that comes off the beach. The town's going to handle it anyway. Rather than trucking it away, put it over there behind the stones, and what's it going to hurt? It's not going to be a great solution, but what's it going to hurt?
We stopped doing that probably about 5 years ago because we were doing it in the summertime when it was 90 degrees and it decomposed and people complained of the smell. But if you did it now, put the stone down, put some of that seaweed on top of it, it'll decompose quickly, enough. So, but by the time the summer months come, and I don't think we'll have much of an odor problem at that point, put it that way.
I would view the odor issue as secondary.
I agree. Yeah. It's me who has to get all the phone calls that the beach stinks. I will say, so I've kind of been, studying that site too and looking at the sediment transport. And in general, sediment goes from west to east on the Nantucket Sound. But when you have these really large jetties, you get almost like a shadow effect, and it's not just here, but you get a shadow effect where the sand will go from west to east, bypass a jetty, and then almost whirl around behind it and deposit. And you see it, that's why we have to dredge Winchmere, Allen Harbor, because you get a pileup of sand on that eastern side. So you're getting not only all the sand that we've dumped over there accumulating in the river, but this just natural attenuation of sand that's causing the river to change too and clog up. And that's a different animal. We'll have to address that some other time.
Yes. All right, Ernie.
Yeah, I'm fine with putting the stones in. I like Mark's idea of putting the seaweed behind it for the time being. It's not going to create an odor issue from my perspective. It's fine.
You could also top dress that with a little bit of sand too, so it's not pure seaweed. We could just put a fine veneer over it, which will help it degrade too.
Yeah, sure.
Mm-hmm. Carolyn?
That sounds fine with me. I like the tow stones. There's no chance that seaweed would be swept back out into that very small channel and possibly clog the whole thing and make it worse?
No, I don't think so. It degrades, it'll redistribute. It's not going to sit there I don't think it's going to sit there like sand does, just deposit there.
Okay. Because if it did get pulled back into that channel, then we're worse off.
It's not going to be a huge amount either.
Okay, then that's fine.
John?
Maybe little signs, scientific experiment in progress to make people more amenable if it does smell.
Yeah, I could do that because when I just say keep off, they rip the signs down. So maybe if I give them an explanation, they won't.
Yeah.
It's an intertidal area. It's going to smell.
True.
That's right. Always does.
Just put
John,
a sign.
any comments?
You could just put a sign that says low tide all day at this location. So I'm in favor of putting in toe stones and putting seaweed on top if that's going to help. But I'm sorry, but I still don't get where we are with this, because is it still true that there is no definitive response from the state about this?
The response from the state that I have is that they are not sure what type of resource area that this is. The little hummock that we're talking about, and whether it's dune or coastal bank. And if it's coastal bank, then they would agree with the rock, a formal rock revetment. If it was a dune, you can't revet a dune. And I've come back to them and said, well, the sediment that's there has been deposited. It's a deposition of bank sand. It's a conglomeration of things over the years. I don't have a definition for it. I've told them I can't really say what this resource, this specific, nearby, it's dune and coastal beach and salt marsh, but this exact location where we want to put the rock, I don't know what I would call it. I would be more inclined for this small area, this 50-foot long section, to call it a coastal bank because it's acting as a vertical buffer. And I haven't gotten anything back from them.
So you told them it's a coastal bank?
I said, in my opinion, it is acting more as a coastal bank than as a coastal dune.
But aside from...
They haven't outright denied it. They just haven't approved it.
So I don't understand what needs to be done to knock loose some kind of decision from it. I mean, and the other part of my question is, okay, assume we go ahead with the half or part measure here of putting toe stones in.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to inform the state if we do that?
Yes, I will.
So
whether or not, I mean, it's yeah, I have to anyways, but I wouldn't want to hide anything from them by any means.
Do you expect that will provoke some other kind of response from them that would make them say something more definitive about the original proposal?
I hope so. I want to invite them, and I have in the past, like last year, I invited them down, but I never got a response, or they said no. They didn't give me a good response I was looking for, but I think it's warranted to have them down again, or have the circuit rider who's responsible for this case down.
Oh, Amy, how responsible are they in the environment we're in right now? I'm almost of the mind we're better to ask for forgiveness rather than permission at this point, given the need to get this addressed.
We're gonna definitely, I mean, in terms of the toe stones, we will do that. We'll see what happens. It depends on, I've had very good response from our newer circuit rider, Andrew Poignant. He's been very responsive for me on Indian Trail. I mean, just a few projects that we had this week. So, but he wasn't involved previously. But they are I don't know. And then I got a hold of the oil spill people at DEP too, because they're all working from home. So maybe this is a good time to get a hold of them.
So my other question, Amy, is just that beach and that parking lot is an important revenue source for the town, right?
Absolutely.
So I would think that other departments in the town, up to and including the town manager and the selectmen, would be concerned about this, the rec department in particular.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to what extent are they aware that that end of the parking lot is under imminent threat of being undermined and destroyed, and the consequences could be negative? And isn't there some political or legal steps that should be taken here to try to force the right outcome out of the state?
John, that's really beyond our purview.
But I can say that the rec department and the rec commissioners are aware. John Mahan asks me routinely what the status is of it, and I just tell him what I've told you. But
so everyone, John, everyone knows about the situation. Everybody, the other town departments are aware of this. Jim, do you have any comments on this?
Well, my main comment would be that we should really make sure that no sand or seaweed or anything continues to get washed into the river. I've been really disappointed to see what happened there in the past several years with that, and getting choked off with sand. Also, just the amount of codium that ends up getting washed in there. If you go, that area used to be a really nice little locals beach. I'm thinking back to the 80s mainly, and the water was pretty clean in there and deeper and flowing. And I tried to go there 3 or 4 years ago, and it was just full of rotten seaweed, basically. There's not enough flow. It's choked off. And, yeah, my main concern there is just it's from Stan's comment. I haven't been down there this week, but sounds like maybe it's starting to flow a little better without dumping the sand. But that's my main concern, is to let that river flow.
It's really not. I mean, if you go up a little bit to where it's flowing, it's only about maybe 10 feet wide from the sand. I mean, the river itself, I mean, it's not like it used to be. I agree with you.
Well, yeah, I haven't seen it, but that's really my main concern. The parking lot to me isn't, I think that can be adjusted pretty easily. That's not something I'm really, I've looked at the way the turnaround is in the parking, and we could lose some of that pretty easily. Might lose one parking space and just have some dune restoration there. So that's how I feel about it anyway.
Did you support the toe stones as a base, at least a temporary base?
I guess not really. I'm not that strongly against it, but I'd rather see a more longer term solution there. I mean, the town should be thinking about the sea level rise and the likelihood that parking lot's going to get destroyed in the coming years. And, we should be thinking about building dunes in that area. It's a barrier beach. It probably never should have had a huge parking lot put on it. Right. Hopefully we're going to have some different transportation systems in the coming decades, and maybe we don't need several hundred parking spaces on a barrier beach. But that's longer term planning. But I'm really strongly against choking off the river anymore. Anyway.
Yeah, those are good ideas, Jim. I mean, I agree. I've been watching the deposition for years, and I've always felt it was degrading. And I just don't mind the town trying to protect that little space now with something like toe stones. It's either that, or I think planning to do what you suggest, which is to look to the future, and that's kind of a big step. Amy, I thought our notice of intent was actually denied by DP initially.
The first one was a couple of years ago. The one last year there was no formal vote, but we voted to approve it. They knew it,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that they would have appealed it.
Right. So
I'm trying to save the town a little bit of time. Well, not time at this point, but money fighting an appeal for it. But maybe that's the route we have to go anyway. So,
yeah,
at this point. But with your direction, we're not supposed to be going into work, but if there's an emergency situation, and I would, not just an environmental emergency, but somebody's going to do something stupid and get hurt down there. I can ask the town administrator to work with the DPW to get a few stones down there.
You know, the thing is, Amy, you said somebody could, people climb down there and everything. Is there more chance of somebody getting hurt with rocks at the bottom?
I don't know.
There's rocks just to the west, so I mean the rocks are there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I'm just saying. I'm
just thinking somebody tripping up on the frayed filter fabric and tumbling down the slope there. I don't know.
Well, they shouldn't be going there because there is a path now.
No, they shouldn't, but.
Well, that's no different than if they walk onto the jetty.
I don't know, but I think right now, only emergency things are being allowed to be done in town. So if you want this done, we have to make the argument that it's an emergency in order to get town forces to work on it right now. So.
Well, I think that I don't mind supporting this, Amy, but I think Jim's comments are pretty significant that whatever was placed landward of the toe stone should be fully contained and there shouldn't be spillage. You know, some of the guys that used to put sand down there may decide, okay, let's just put a whole lot down there. We've got, permission to do so.
Some oversight.
I think that's real important. So would you like a vote on emergency NOI tonight? Or just emergency water?
Certification, please.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to move that we approve emergency certification for laying down toe stones along the damaged area of the coastal bank at the end of Red River Beach, with capping of the landward side of the stones with both codium and sand, not to spill over the perimeter of the stones. Could I have a second, please?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? I would just say that if maybe the emergency can come with a after the fact narrative, some discussion or plan as to what happened, just to document it.
Yeah.
We could find ourselves being asked to explain what happened, and I think your point on the stones can be removed as a temporary solution is important too. And so it's just trying to save what we have for now while we try to figure out the best way to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
Any further discussion?
I can do that.
So your notion, Amy, is that this is something that the town is just going to do out of normal highway funds. This isn't.
I think we have the materials and equipment, but I will verify that.
So I'm just trying to work the other side of the equation that the original plan is funded by CPC. And if we're expecting some partial measure to be funded by that, I'm just not sure what kind of issues we're going to be running into there. So
yeah,
it's probably going to be easier to just make the case that this is something the town has to do now with materials and labor that the town has on hand.
All right. I will.
I don't know what you think, Jim, since you're also on that
right
committee, but.
Yeah, I don't see any problem with using existing materials and labor separately to do this temporary thing. I don't think it would affect any future CPC project.
No, I don't.
Or
I don't.
pending project.
I'll let Dave Nixon know that it's going to happen. I'll keep him in the loop. I know he likes that.
The motion in front of us has sand and seaweed being backfilled, right? And do we all agree with that? I thought Jim was hesitant, and I'm a little hesitant about sand being used. I can see that sweeping back out.
My feeling is something that's closely monitored by Amy that helps cap the stones and provide a little more vertical rise. And I agree with you. I'm concerned about past practices where I think things were overdone. But I do think that, you want to protect the coastal bank that still exists. And so put down a row of big stones and then put a little material behind it. Yep. It has to be landward of it to try to protect what's there for the coastal bank. And yeah, I agree. In 2 years, it's probably gone, but the stones will still be there. And so I don't really object to it. I just hope it's done in a way where it's, not over applied.
And Brad, you don't think that in 2 years, if it's gone, it's not sitting in the middle of that channel?
Well, I would think the codium would be biodegradable, and we're talking just like a light layer of sand, if I understand this right, just to cover the codium.
That's what I understand it.
Bucket compared to what's already what's out there.
Okay.
I mean, it's kind of just a step to try this because, we wanted a full revetment, and they're saying no to that.
Right.
So it's going to either be you fight the revetment or you go to what Jim is suggesting and you try to you retreat. And we've talked about retreat a lot over the years, but we haven't had many cases where people really want to go that way.
Right.
I hope we get to that point sometime soon. Mm-hmm. But I don't mind trying this approach now and seeing if we can protect things. And if it doesn't work, then we haven't contributed that much material to the area. I mean, if you remember, Jim, in the past, there was a big loads of sand that were dumped there.
4 to 5 times a year.
Yeah, so we're definitely not going to go back there. And I think Amy's going to provide a strong message that we don't want a lot of material on top of the codium. And we can all go down there. We can all ask to be informed as to when this is going to happen, and we can observe as well.
Socially distancing. I can't.
Right. With our distancing.
Yes.
Yep.
There's plenty of room now.
So,
any just to modify the motion or any further discussion?
I'd just like to say that at some point I'd like to have a more full discussion about what retreat really means there. And but tonight is not the time to do it, but it should be on the table at some point.
John, I welcome that. And I think in the broader context of all over the town, I think that we have so many tear down rebuilds that provide opportunities to have retreat that really would come in the form of improved habitats from 0 to 50. And we're not really seeing that happen. And, in many cases, it's a property owner's decision. But I think there are some gains that could be made there that would be better for a lot of reasons in the long run. So, yeah, let's have that conversation when we can.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, I'll call a vote. I guess I'll roll call it. And so I vote in favor. Brad Chase, Stan, you're up.
Aye, Stan Pastuzak.
Mark?
Aye.
Ernie?
I'm aye.
Carolyn?
Aye.
John?
Aye. John Ketchum.
And Jim?
I'm going to vote no.
Okay, so we have 6 in favor and 1 negative. And I would just ask Amy if you could let us know when it's going to happen, and it would be good to have people become familiar with, when this application occurs and to keep an eye on it.
No problem.
All right. Thank you for the good discussion. I apologize. I'm trying to move things along. I think for this agenda, we should be within 3 hours. Fairly light agenda. Do we have minutes, Amy?
We have one set of minutes from April 1st. Do you want me just to email them to you quickly, Brad? This was the meeting where honestly, all it was because we had to open everything on April 1st and move it to April 2nd. So all was all of that.
Yeah, no, I'm fine. We've got great reviewers of, what's written here, so I don't need to see it.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on April 1st?
No comments.
No.
Okay.
All right. Well, I move that we approve the minutes for April 1st, 2020. Could I have a second, please?
I'll second.
All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Okay. Just a couple quick things. Waterways Committee is not meeting. They're a non-regulatory board. They're not meeting at this time. That puts us in a bit of a conundrum with docks and our water dependent structures because our regulations state that they need waterways approval prior to coming to us. However, I don't know if that's enforceable, and I posed that question to council. Because they're a non-regulatory board, they're just advisory. I don't know if we legally can not open a hearing for a water dependent structure project. So we have one coming up, and I emailed John Rendon and Heinz, and they, I think, talked to Waterways or Matt Hart, and they really want to have input. And I said, we really want their input. I asked if it could be done informally, that if they could review the project and email me and I could get you their comments, but they would prefer to hold off on dock projects or water dependent structures projects until they can actually meet again. I just don't know legally if we could do that.
Amy, isn't there a special provision in the state right now where we can?
There is.
We don't have to do any hearings at all, right?
Correct. With the state, there's a provision that, and the reason why I'm trying to push it that we are is because we don't want a backlog, and we also want to, for some projects, try to keep things going for people where it's not going to have a harmful effect. But yes, there is a grace period essentially for projects where we don't have to technically hear them until 45 days after this emergency is declared over, essentially.
Is this pending? Is this pending project the one on the Herring River Ring?
Yes.
Can we pick which cases we want the 45 days after?
I don't know.
That's what I was gonna ask. I mean, isn't that all or nothing? I would think that you can't just pick and choose. I wouldn't.
I don't know. I mean,
it seems
technical review is arduous for those projects. And it's hard to do that remotely.
Yeah, I would agree. This format's a bit tricky, and with the issues with waterways, it might be best just to hold off on water-dependent structures.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I agree with that point.
The other option is that we can open it and start it. To me, it's not going to be a simple, one hearing proposal. So I think those are the two options. And so I've got to look at the new regs and just think about them closely to try to understand what it's saying. But I think for next time, that's the two options: is to open it, continue it, or to not open it. Yeah, I guess Amy.
We open it.
Probably,
I'm sorry, Brett. I was going to say, I think we open it, it'd be hard to close it down.
Well, then you have 45 days. I think that's how. Is that what's happening?
I'm not. No, if we open it, I'm not sure. I can probably waive that 45-day window.
Well, right, but I do think there'll be enough questions for this particular site that it wouldn't be a one hearing decision, I would think.
I agree with you, but what if this thing lasts for a year?
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess if Amy can look into the specs behind this, and I want to read the new regs too, and see. You know, I do agree this format is tough, and I know a couple of towns off Cape that have decided to not hold a few hearings. So it's something we should look into. But I do agree with Amy. If we can get some things done, that's good too.
Yeah, it's not easy, but I think it is important, and it shows the town's making a good faith effort to try to keep things going if we can.
But you are getting reduced filings too, correct?
Yes, we've started to get reduced filings. We are, we have 2 new ones, I think, for next time, plus the 2 that we continue tonight. So it's helpful. There's a lot more phone calls and emails that take up a lot of time right now. And we are doing we're doing a lot of field work actually right now. We'll be out tomorrow. And Stan helped me the other day. I happened to run into him on the beach, and I was repairing fencing, and we successfully socially distanced fixing fencing.
What are you doing tomorrow?
Well, no, I'm not doing hard field work. We're just monitoring tomorrow. But field work.
My feeling regarding the dock proposal is that it's complicated, and the Waterways Commission opinion is very valuable to us. We're taking it as a serious obligation, and we need their input. And I would hesitate to decide on anything without their input.
I agree with you. I'm just about the legal aspect of whether or not we can hold it up. But I agree with you. I want their input prior. I just don't know if, since they're an advisory board, if we can purposely continue a project because we haven't had their input when they're just advisory. So I will try to flesh that out. Got a long list of to-dos to talk to people over the next week or 2.
These are complicated issues.
Yeah. Shifting gears a little bit, I was going to put on Bell's Neck Bogs water management on the next meeting for more discussion. As we're into
Thank you. Yep, I think that's a good idea. I'd like to, have us make some progress on a decision to close the gate during off hours. And then we can have updates from the subcommittee on the drafting of the management plan. So I think that would be, we won't have to have too much time, but I think it would be good to have it on the agenda.
Yep, I'll put it on. A reminder that our next meeting is 3 weeks away because it's a 5 Wednesday month.
Mm-hmm. Okay, anything else, folks? All right, well, I motion that we adjourn.
Second.
All right, thank you. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Amy, thanks a million. Really appreciate all the effort to make this work.